It has just struck noon if you're in Pacific time zone. I guess thanks everyone for joining. Today we'll be discussing the Lockbox distribution and governance. There are a few ideas or 5 proposals that the community can select between. And I suppose today we'll be deciding amongst ourselves some of the advantages or disadvantages of our options. Joining us, we have Alex from ZF. We've got Jason McGee from Shielded Labs. We've got Josh Swihart of the ECC, and I'm from ZecHub. So I think we have 9 speakers. There's 1 open slot. The idea behind this call is to present like a more open forum than previous calls that we've had in the past. So if you are interested in giving your input, hit the join as speaker button, and at some point we'll have you on. I think we're going to be, the first thing we should do is discuss each of our options. So I think we could begin with Z-Block. It might be the proposal which most of you are already familiar with. Josh, would you be okay starting with perhaps an explanation of Z-Block, and then the community, I think it's CNC, community and coin holder proposal? That'd be okay?
Yeah, that's fine. So we might want to, we can link to these two. If someone could link to them in the thread, that would be great. From the maybe this community polling thing. Is there a way I can do it? If somebody could link to them on the forum, that would be good. There's a list of them there, and there's links to the zips so people can dig in some detail. So I'll start with the Zcash governance block. So that one's been out for some time. It kind of all of these proposals assume that the community wants the dev fund to continue. There'll be an option on the survey, and we can talk about what the survey looks like. Jason maybe can talk about it, what the survey will look like. But you know, the default option is effectively that the dev fund will end, right? So the dev fund ends in November. We created this lockbox mechanism as a community because we said, like, we want to keep it, and we're going to give ourselves a year to kind of figure out what it would look like. And in the meantime, we'll keep ZCG, the Zcash community grants, going with 8% of the block rewards. So that's what happened. And one of the kind of really early proposals came from me, which would effectively that the pool get split into 20% of the block rewards get split into 2 pools, and one is major grants and one is minor grants. ZCG by default would continue to administer the kind of minor grants program. There's some rules around it. And then the major grants would go to a block of trusted entities in the ecosystem with some, you know, some ability over time to adjust who those participants are. And so it's kind of a combination of a broader governance mechanism as well as a funding mechanism. So governance decisions could go to this block as well, and that could be inclusive of any number of organizations like ECC, ZF, Shielded Labs, as well as other constituent groups that may not be an organization. So it could be something like a DAO, like ZecHub. It could be coin holders, which is one that was suggested. It could be core developers, or it could be other constituency groups that the community wishes would be a part of it. Part of the intent of that one is that it's flexible, such that if an organization disappears, is no longer a good actor, and so on, they can be voted out by the other constituent groups. If there's a new group that emerges and earns the trust of the community, and people feel like it'd be good for them to participate, then that they could be added. And what would happen is, in the case of a governance decision, or in the case of funding request of a major grant, the organizations or the groups, the constituency groups that that have that are part of it would each have a number of votes. So let's say 3 votes each, and they could use those votes. They could use those votes in the form of signing keys. So it's all under a multi-sig, and as soon as they voted to approve a decision or to approve a grant, they simply sign their keys. And as soon as a certain threshold is met, then the decision's made. Now, it could be that something remain open for some time because maybe one of the groups wants to receive more information, or they'd like to see change or something like that. So it allows that kind of flexibility as well. So that's the Zcash governance block. The other one, the community and coin holder model, is a little bit more simple, and it's another that I submitted after a lot of conversation. There's a lot of conversations in the community and some questions about the complexity of Zblock and what could be implemented and that kind of thing. I created this kind of other simple model, which is that it's closer to something that I saw with like in Optimism, which is a bicameral, except it's not pure governance. It's only for funding decisions. And so for funding decisions, 8% would go to the community, and the community is defined as ZCG, and there's no restriction in terms of the size of a grant or anything like that. But 8% would go to the community in the form of elected representatives. And 12% would go to coin holders. And so someone that wanted to receive a grant from the dev fund could submit a proposal to one of those. And so coin holders, because of we can't expect coin holder votes to like occur all the time in real time. Those would be spaced out on a quarterly basis. And so people could submit grant requests to coin holders. There would be a minimum review period of 30 days prior to the vote. And then a vote would be conducted by coin holders. And if they fund it, they fund it. If they don't, they don't. And likewise, somebody could submit a grant to ZCG and receive a decision as they do now. And that would just kind of continue forward. So ZCG would be more agile in terms of being able to respond to grant applications. And people that are, again, applying for grants would be able to apply to either one. That's kind of the high level summary.
Awesome, thank you. And yeah, so I suppose a quick comparison that I could make between Zblock and the CNC. I don't know. It seems with this Zblock and the idea of nested frost, it in my perspective, might introduce I don't know, some technical challenges that need to be overcome. Like it seems CNC has some components which already exist and are ready to go, whereas Zblock, I don't know what the status is of frost or nested frost and if it can be used now. Maybe we can get some answers from the devs in a second. So there are 3 other proposals. There is community governed ZCAP, pure ZCAP, and pure coin holder voting. So I guess since we've got Alex from ZF, would you mind going over pure ZCAP as a concept and community governed ZCAP and our options?
Sure. And just to be clear that these are not, ZF created or sponsored. They were put forth by Jack Gavigan, our former executive director. But I'm happy to provide summaries on both. So community governed funding model. This model allocates 8% of block rewards to Zcash community grants, ZCG, and 12% to a Zcap controlled fund managed by the Zcash Foundation through the Zcash Community Advisory Panel, ZCAP. It prioritizes community consensus, decentralizes decision-making, and ensures accountability with a 50% participation threshold for ZCAP voting. The model addresses the funding gap, secures funds in a multi-sig wallet, and maintains flexibility without changes to ZCG governance or protocol governance. And then the pure ZCAP funding model, this proposal allocates 20% of block rewards to a ZCAP-controlled fund managed by the Zcash Foundation through the Zcash Community Advisory Panel, ZCAP. It ensures community consensus and decentralization by requiring a 50% participation threshold for ZCAP voting. The model focuses on giving the Zcash community greater control over funding decisions, addresses the funding gap, and secures the fund in a multi-sig wallet overseen by key Zcash organizations without altering protocol governance. So those are the quick high levels.
Thank you. Yeah, so again, if we use our same kind of criteria, which are the easiest to implement, because there is some time considerations we need to make, as this needs to be in place and ready by November. So yeah, these are considerations for the community. I could give, again, my opinion. Perhaps pure ZCAP, as it's elected, the members are, well, I suppose, selected by purely the Zcash Foundation at the moment. This does introduce a form of centralization where it could be more decentralized. Sorry, Jason, you had something.
Yeah, no, I was going to sort of echo what you said. Like, one of the things that came out of last year's polling for the Dev Fund was that there's a real, there was real consensus that showed that the community wanted to further decentralize governance. So it feels like, you know, there seems to be a lot of confusion around ZCAP. Like, ZCAP's not governance, and it's an advisor for the Zcash Foundation. The polls are not non-binding; it's purely advisory, and ZF has never done this, but they could go against ZCAP's recommendation if they wanted to, right? I don't think it ever has happened. It's been super useful for governance, been super useful for electing board members, ECG members, and sort of determining, as a mechanism for determining consensus on network upgrades and dev fund models. But you know, I got the sense that we wanted to move away from that. And this sort of puts it in the hands of ZF, which, you know, while they have the most robust panel, it just feels like we could move it in into a more decentralized model, which a lot of the other things do. So yeah, if I had to like summarize my point, I think like panels like ZCAP and ZAC and others help inform organizations about community sentiment, but they're not really forms of governance for funding themselves.
Thank you. Yeah. And I suppose on the complete other end of that spectrum, you would have pure coin holder voting, in which 20% of block rewards go towards a coin holder controlled fund. And it's managed exclusively by the coin holders voting. It'd be active until the third halving and requires 420,000 ZEC for any approvals. This amount, 420,000, it appears in the CNC as well. Josh, would you mind kind of explaining where this, I think it's 2.625% of the circulating supply. Is there any significance behind that?
No, I shouldn't say completely no, but it's somewhat of an arbitrary number, and it's 2% of the total, what would be the total issuance, understanding issuance changes over time, saying like, look, there's got to be some kind of minimum threshold of coin holder participation. So if nothing receives, if something goes to a void for coin holders, like what's the minimum we can expect? And we've seen, you know, depending on the communities that you look at, whether it's like in Cosmos or what we've seen recently with Solana, the participation can be much higher. You know, if we got like 10% participation, that would be awesome. But we also have this kind of decisions to make about how coin holders can can vote, and can they vote with transparent tokens, or can they only vote with shielded tokens? And that's an unanswered question as well. So there's some. This was like, what's a realistic amount, assuming that it's probably, shielded tokens, in order to expect for a minimum out of the gate, so that we don't, and when it's something that's brand new to the ecosystem, so we don't overly, you don't have a situation where there's so few votes, but they skew in one direction, and that we get approval. Like, what's a reasonable amount? So that's what I started with. It was some kind of back of the napkin ideas based upon, again, like participation in other ecosystems, what our total issuance would be, what would be a reasonable expectation as a minimum threshold for an approval. But it's something that, if that's what the community wanted to do, that could be further refined in terms of what that threshold should be.
One thing I'll add to that is that I think it's attainable. Like last year when we did the Dev Fund coin holder vote, there were over 500,000 coins that participated, and that was the one for the runoff between 20% Lockbox and then the one ZIP 1015 that got implemented, which was 8% ZCG, 12% Lockbox. So there are coin holders who are eager to participate in this. And some of them have reached out privately, some of them have reached out publicly. There's this guy, I think his name is Outgoing Doze on the forum, who he's like a hardcore coin holder advocate with like more than 100,000 tokens, and he's eager to participate in this. So I think that threshold is attainable, and I think coin holders will be very excited if one of these proposals are implemented, and they will make an effort to participate.
Thank you. Yeah, so perhaps those are the advantages. There are maybe some disadvantages of a purely coin holder voting governance system. So someone could simply acquire a large number of ZEC and use those coins to, for example, they could just prevent any grant proposals from going through. And because they're shielded, we wouldn't know entirely what this entity is. There's I think there was also another concern that Dev Fund organizations which receive the Dev Fund will be using those coins to essentially get their way. Do we have any way to mitigate some of these issues? Or does anyone have any thoughts regarding?
Yeah, a couple of things. So the pure coin holder one, as it relates to the first concern, yes, somebody could choose to acquire a bunch of tokens with the intent. I mean, they'd have to acquire them, but they could borrow them in order to block all funding. The CNC model allows for the community to fund things independently of the coin holders, right? So if the coin holders aren't stepping up, aren't voting, it doesn't completely kind of stop grants from occurring, because ZCG can continue to fund them, or the community can through ZCG. As it relates to what was the next concern? Squirrel?
Dev Fund being used in governance.
Oh yeah.
What was it?
So yeah, the intent is if you're the challenge. I mean, and there may be some ways to prove this, but if somebody is potentially the recipient of a grant at the and they submit it to the coin holders, then they need to recuse themselves from voting those coins if they're going to net benefit. If it's all private, like, how do you prove that? Maybe there's some other ways of proving that, and that includes ongoing transparency of what's held, or I don't know. There's probably some things that we could do there, but that there is some risk. Now there's some veto power with that model, with the CNC model, and the pure coin holder model, where the signers, you have to have a multi-sig to release those funds. So, and the signers, if they feel like something is amiss, or something's illegal, so it can't be funded, or for some other, some reason, they can either choose to challenge or to veto the decision. And there's a check there. And again, that's just funding. That's not governance of the protocol. So you can't kind of get something through in terms of changing consensus rules. Ultimately, that flows through the repo owners, through the devs.
Thanks. Yes. So with our coin holder voting in particular, would you think this perhaps invites a more significant amount of regulatory scrutiny as it stands currently? Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it's less. Yeah.
Oh,
so,
less.
And so, yeah, it's less regulatory scrutiny. So, I mean, we took this out, I think, I don't want to speak for the foundation or Shielded Labs, but I think they may have had kind of their independent research in terms of regulatory or legal things related to these proposals. But we, with our attorneys who are good crypto regulatory attorneys, took a hard look at the proposal and felt really great about the CNC proposal, that it's furthering decentralization and reducing risk to the project.
Yeah, I can second Josh on that as well. We had the same conversations with our lawyers and got very similar feedback.
Cool. Okay, so I suppose from the regulatory perspective, it could be safer. However, there is a different way you could look at it, in that I suppose with this pure coin holder voting proposal in particular, it's one basket of eggs. So the funds themselves aren't really distributed anywhere else. And so, I don't know, maybe if there was a protocol issue, or if there was some national security emergency that, I don't know, made it a target, it's something to consider, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not even that. It's just that coin holder voting right now is just so experimental, and the tools that we have aren't that sophisticated. I mean, Han's done an awesome job integrating the first version into Y Wallet, and now there's a new version that's a standalone app that can be integrated into other wallets, but it's still very, very new. So something could go wrong that freezes up that pool, and that's the real benefit of the CNC over the pure coin holder, is that it gives you the flexibility to use something like ZCG, which is proven, which has existed for around more than 4 years now. And, the community, it has a track record, it has a structure for funding. So it's sort of battle tested and ready. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, keep in mind too, both these proposals are term limited. So they're both specified for 3 years, which is what is currently scheduled to be the next halvening. And in any like with anything, if something's not working or needs to be changed, then a zip can be introduced and a network upgrade can happen in order to make a change.
Speaking of zips, so I think it was the CNC proposal which already has a draft zip prepared. This zip on-chain accountable voting. So I think, just to kind of quickly circle back to my initial concern is, how ready are we to implement this? Would it maybe have some potential to delay a network upgrade?
Oh, the on-chain accountable voting is more specific to Zblock, for allowing various organizations to have multiple keys and do a multi-sig that way. There's a separate supporting zip. It's in the same forum post, called the Deferred Dev Fund Lockbox Disbursement Mechanism. So there's a couple different options in there. One, and they're related to how funds get dispersed out of the lockbox that's there today. How do they get dispersed, kind of moving forward? Spending time with at least the ECC's core team, the feeling is, if there was an impact, it would be minimal to the existing NU7 schedule. It may though, you know, it could cause some weeks of delay. Maybe that's a couple, maybe that's 4, but we're talking about weeks, not months, if this were to be implemented ahead of the rest of the NU7 schedule. So that one is very doable. The sense is in fact that potentially it could be coupled with the rest of the NU7 activities. There's a question of like how much technology do we want to include in one network upgrade and whether that's just too much. And the other is that it should be decoupled from what's currently NU7 anyway, because we don't have a firm schedule on when the current NU7 would be deployed. And the idea here is like what could be deployed before the November November deadline, or when DevFund will be turned off. So the sense and part of the set of recommendations. So ECC made a recommendation or endorsed the CNC was that it could actually be it was simple enough to get implemented. On-chain accountable voting will probably take some more time.
Cool, thank you.
And yeah,
sorry.
And by the way, all of these, you mentioned that one has a zip, but all of these in here have a zip that's been written, so they're all pretty well specified.
Yes, sorry. So we've discussed the 5 options available. I've given some questions. I think it'd be good to open the floor for anyone who wants to raise their concerns or endorse one of the proposals. I think you could raise your hand, and at Zcash we'll be able to add you, or if you're a speaker already, you can open your mic.
Hey, Jason, I'm curious, does ZecHub have an opinion or an endorsement on any of the funding models? And did you think about possibly pulling the DAO?
At the moment, there is no ZecHub endorsement. We can pull the DAO, of course. We've got plenty of DAO members in the call at the moment. They can shout out any of their ideas if they wish. Yeah, we could poll.
Hey guys, this is Dismat here. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
So speaking for myself, because I can't speak for the DAO, I actually really like the Z-block proposal. And I do have a question, because it seems that most of the major orgs have chosen the CNC proposal. And I'm curious why you guys moved away from the Z-block in particular, because I think that was kind of the way to go. And I'm curious of your guys' thoughts.
Yeah, I can go first. Like, look, I never endorsed or, was a proponent of the Z-block. I was open to the idea. We had a discussion about it. I think it was in January of this year. I think there were some issues with it, but in terms of like the implications for getting Zcash deprecated and NU7 and ZSAs activated, like I think we want something that's easy to implement. And the major problem with the Z-block is that there are a lot of unanswered questions, and implementability is a lot more difficult and uncertain. I also personally like about the CNC that it incorporates coin holders, and I think it does so in a meaningful way that can evolve in the future. Coin holders are an important constituent, an important stakeholder, and Zcash has sort of overlooked them over the years. So I think it's long overdue to have some sort of meaningful coin holder participation, and something like the CNC does that in a realistic way.
Yeah, and I'd like to, I agree with what Jason just said. I'd also like to add that in all the discussions we've had and kind of pulling these apart, the most flexible for for grantees or potential grantees is the CNC model. I mean, you have two pools you can apply to, one or the other or both. Then, if you get rejected by one, you could apply to the other. But also the flow of coins, in this model allows for ZCG to cover some large grants right off the bat if those come up for consideration. Whereas some of the other models are less flexible in the way that the money would become available, which could potentially slow down, development could slow down some of the larger grants that, ZCG has provided to people like Kedit, to drawing a total blank on other names right this second, but to the other ecosystem participants. And so that flexibility, I think, is super important as we're talking about these huge milestones like NU7, Zcash deprecation, ZSAs, etc.
I do got a follow-up question. So with those, thoughts being said, is each organization prepared for the community to not want to do any dev fund at all? Have you guys considered that possibility? And what would the Zcash look like at that point?
Well, I think the important thing to recognize here is, well, first, from Sheeta Lab's perspective, I say this all the time, but we don't receive block rewards, or we've never received the dev fund directly or indirectly. It's all donations based. So it wouldn't have any impact on us. It could potentially have an impact on the other Zcash orgs, but remember that, these organizations have already sort of been bootstrapped to some extent, in that they received, some of them received the founders rewards, some of them received dev fund funding for 4 years. ZCG is continuing to receive 8%. So there'd still be some treasury. And, at that point, you either need to exhaust your holdings and find other sources of funding, or you hope that the coin goes up and suddenly you're sitting on a lot more money than you've been for the past however many years. So I don't think that it would be necessarily detrimental. It could result in some setbacks, especially if we're sitting around, this price level that we're currently at. But I do think that, there are other, it's not like a definite nail in the coffin. The other point that's really relevant to this is that I don't think that there's any question about community support for the dev fund. Like, we've pulled on this a number of times, and there is overwhelming support for the dev fund. And I don't believe that that has changed. The poll that we circulate, we'll ask a couple questions. One, it will ask which proposals you support. You can pick more than one, or if you want to end the dev fund. And the other question that it'll ask that is very relevant to this conversation is, do you prioritize extending the dev fund and introducing a new funding model, even if it results in delays to NU7? So I think the results of those questions will be very informative to that question that you asked.
Thanks for your response.
Yeah, for ECC, we have, full transparency. And I think, like, we have historically been 100% reliant, or near 100% reliant, on development funding. We feel like the work that we do is really valuable to the community, both in terms of the core protocol, which we brought to life. I think, the two people on ECC on the core team that know how to do circuit design. I don't know that that's anybody else in any other org do, like Shambo does. But Darren Strad have some pretty unique skill sets. And so I think what they do is really valuable. And then the other thing we focused on is Zashi, and bring Zashi to market and have a kind of a whole roadmap for driving both a better user experience and more users into the platform through that. Because I think pretty soon we're going to have a scalable protocol, which is pretty exciting. And based on some of the work that Shambo is doing, that ECC is in position to help implement. And so with our funding, like, we don't have multiple years. We've got decisions to make. If there's not support by the community for us to apply for grants, then we'll have to figure out what changes we need to make. Either, like, do we get leaner somewhere? Do we focus on one thing and not on another thing? Can we get third-party funding? What are the options for third-party funding? But we don't have multiple years of runway. When I came back in first part of, or right at the end of 2023 to lead ECC, at that time we only had 12 months. And we were able to restructure some things to give us some more time. But we have still kind of been sitting out there kind of on this perpetual kind of 12 months until we had this bump in price recently, which was great, and that gave us more runway. But sitting here at $31 a ZEC, we're first part of next year we'll run out of cash, all things being equal. So it's up to the community whether or not it wants to fund us, but we'll figure out what to do based on what the community decides.
Yeah. Also, to reiterate that any of these proposals just give ZF, ECC, and others the ability to request funding through these mechanisms. There's obviously no guarantee of funding. So, we ZF ceased receiving dev fund, in November, like everybody else. And so, us looking forward, us looking at our future budgeting and our runway and all of those considerations is, it's almost independent of this. Like, what will be really helpful, obviously, is to know what our options are going forward, which is what the resolution of these discussions will result in. But then that'll just give us a clearer picture of one potential area, avenue of funding, through the Zcash community, coin holders, however this works out. But we still will be in a position where, that certainly wouldn't cover all of our required funding. And so, we'll continue to look at our budget, look at the work we're doing, and look at alternate avenues for funding, regardless of the outcome of these discussions.
Cool, thank you. There was another idea to defer Lockbox distribution until ZSAs were live on mainnet. And so, it kind of helps put things in context when speaking of the existing runways that organizations have and the work that they're doing to move Zcash forward. The floor is still open for everyone. If you have ideas or concerns or anything at all, feel free to join.
Can I ask Dismat a question?
Sure.
Dismat has been awesome helping to administer and organize coin holder votes, and I'm curious, like, he knows more about it. Second to Han, like he's been very involved in like testing and organizing coin holder polls, and I'm curious what he thinks about the process and actually implementing it as a funding model. Do you think that there will be any challenges, or do you think it'll be pretty seamless?
I think there's a lot of opportunity. I would consider myself, above the curve on, as a technologist, and it's somewhat hard for me to set up, but I did get it going, and Han has been a great resource for me. So kudos to him. He's doing a lot of great work in the ecosystem. And I love the idea of coin voting. It's just in terms of 100%, I'm not quite there. And I wanted to push back a little bit on the CNC because you mentioned that you like that it has coin voting, but so does Zblock. So in particular, what's the difference in your mind between Zblock coin voting and the alternative?
It's a neutered version of coin holder voting. Like 12% of the block rewards can be directed by coin holders subject to veto by a three-party multi-sig, right? So they can direct funding. With Zblock, the difference is it's watered down. They don't direct. They get all their coins account for one constituent of Zblock. So, if they differ from the majority of like ECC, ZecHub, ZF, and Shielded Labs, then they don't get to allocate funds as they see fit. So that's really the difference.
But isn't that a benefit? rather than a downside because more people have a voice?
I guess it depends on your perspective. From my perspective, I said this earlier in the call, and I feel like coin holders have been a forgotten stakeholder or overlooked stakeholder, and so I feel like this sort of gets them in the mix. So I like it.
Yeah, I know.
Again,
I definitely want them to participate. I just feel like it's more evenly distributed with Zblock, in my opinion.
yeah. Does anybody else have any comment on that?
I think a nice way to clarify things or to get like a great amount of consensus on each one of the proposals is if in some way we can we could like create a poll for the community where they kind of rank each of the proposals in terms of like some criteria which we're hoping to achieve, like decentralization, or regulatory safety, or accountability and transparency. Like we could rank them 1 to 5 and then like get a total of what people think about each one and how they rank.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool. Because those attributes, like having an easy way to see what those different attributes are, might be really helpful for somebody, especially like a lot of people that were in a poll. You know, they're not necessarily paying attention day to day, so they're gonna have to try to dig into a lot of detail to kind of understand the distinctions between these. So that could be super useful. The one thing I'll say about Zblock, because you know I'm the author of Zblock. It was my like kind of original concept that I was pushing for, and I love the idea, and I still love the idea. Like when we had the conversation earlier this year, some of the pushback that we got on the call and that I heard from was like some other risks, and like one of the other risks was, in addition to the complexity kind of out of the gate, is the risk of collusion, and whether or not the various constituent groups can collude with one another to try to push through a governance change or try to push through a funding thing. And so that was one. Is like, well, in this model doesn't allow for that kind of collusion. It's more market driven based upon what the coin holders hold. So I could suppose the coin holders could, but the organizations can't like play favorites. And so I was trying to really kind of simplify that with the CNC model, and also do something that I thought was implementable.
Thanks.
To Josh's point, like there's one thing that I want to add to this collusion thing. Under the Z block, you have the ability to vote constituents on or off. So you could see core orgs colluding to remove coin holders, right? Like Josh, that is possible in the proposal, right?
That is possible, unless you change as it's currently written. Yeah. It could be changed that coin holders couldn't be voted out or something like that. It limited the constituent groups to the various organizations. So that could be the case. But the way that it's written is flexible, that any kind of new entity can be added and any entity can be removed by, I think, a supermajority is what I put in there.
Yeah, I think there's room for improvement, but I just like the spirit of it. I think that's kind of what we were shooting for. But maybe another way of framing this that can give a different perspective is, I'm curious on the most likely realistic timeline for each of the proposals. Like, how long will it actually take? I don't want to know the possible timeline. I want to know the realistic timeline.
Well, this stuff that I know for a fact, the CNC proposal can be implemented, and so can probably, because I think community. So the CNC model, the community governed funding model from Jack, the pure coin holder funding model, and the pure Zcap funding model, those ones would all have the same kind of lockbox distribution mechanism. And that could all be done. Like I don't. The conversation I have with the core team is that it could be done really, really quickly, and there's like absolutely no problem getting this done well ahead of November. To kind of give you an idea, it's not that hard. It's been solved. The one with on-chain accountable voting, the Z block, that's an undetermined amount of time. That would take longer.
Good to know.
Awesome. And again, if you have your own opinions, feel free to voice them. Yeah, we've got Paku raising his hand. And
Hey, right. Hey, hello everyone. Sorry, there's a little bit of background noise. I think that I don't have a preference for any of the proposals. I think that each one of them is interesting on its own way. I do think that it's important to perhaps focus on, like, each person voting, they have to focus on what are the outcomes that they would like to achieve with their vote, and then think about how their vote could actually, like, how each one of these models, like the one they support, will help on their vision for the Zcash ecosystem. To me, like, as you might have heard in my presentation on ZCon, the last ZCon, I think that we are still too few people developing, and I think that we need to be able to have a sustainable ecosystem that is mostly self-sustainable, and that it can host a varied population of developers and organizations, like a mix of like individual contributors and organizations of different sizes and origins. And so when I'm trying to decide which one is the best, I have that thing in mind, and also to think about, like, what this Matt was saying on being realistic on timelines, and also, as I believe, like, not letting perfect be the enemy of good, and also have in mind that probably no proposal will be set in stone forever. There will be probably improvements along the way, and further governance changes and more enhancements, because that's how, like, the nature of Zcash. Like, we never settle on anything. We want always more, and to be better, and to constantly improve. So I think that's the spirit I'm looking at all of this. With a little bit of anxiety, as everyone, because Zcashers, we are, very intense, and living it with that spirit. But yeah, that's what I wanted to comment. No, and is not pushing anything in particular, just like chipping in, like, on something.
thanks, Paku. Agreed. Yeah, I think what you said about constantly improving is super important. There is, I have read some people have the opinion that we did set out, or at least last year when this current funding model was introduced, there was an end date set, and so there is an opinion that Zcash keeps extending the dev fund.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, but that end date, you're talking about the one for zip 1014 or the one for zip 1015?
1015.
Yeah, but that end date was because it was only for 1 year to give the community enough time to implement a new funding model. So I think that sort of implied that there would be an extension.
Yeah,
That's
understood.
right. I mean, that's what it was. It was because we said we want to continue the dev fund. Basically, everybody said yes, we want to continue the dev fund. It's like, well, what model do we want? Well, nobody has a model that we like yet. So let's kick the can a year and give us time to get other alternatives. Because I think at the time maybe only ZBlock had been proposed. And it's like we need some more options to consider. We wanted to do some more research, like dug into the optimism, spent some time with that team, the optimism team. Some other people did some research and really did a hard think about it. So the intention was to take that time to get some proposals formally specified in the form of zips, and then allow the community to make a decision, which is kind of where we are. But it wasn't like the dev fund's going to end. We're going to extend the dev fund one more year, and then that's going to be it. That's not what the community signaled last year.
Yeah, and the one thing to add to that is that 1 year was intended to be short in order to incentivize people to like get their asses into gear and propose something and get something implemented to access those funds from the lockbox.
I just want to point out, isn't it safe to say though that the community can change their mind within a year? And has performance been up to par? That is the question. So I want the dev fund. I've already publicly said, but I'm realistic in the sense that I feel like many in the community feel jaded, and maybe they will change their vote. So that's what
I agree with you 100%. Like these are things that we should be pulling on regularly. I don't know if the community will change its mind, but I do think that there are people who may change their mind based on performance, and it's worth like the poll that you'll receive tomorrow will have that option to end the dev fund and return 100% of block rewards to miners.
The other one, the other thing to mention with I think maybe any of these proposals, right? There's, and I think maybe Alex mentioned it or somebody mentioned it, but there's no obligation to fund anything. So, and the way that I wrote the CNC and I think that it got adopted into some of the others is that the coin holders or whoever can just let the fund sit. If there's no proposals they like, and then eventually they could say, okay, let's burn the coins or do whatever they want. But there's no obligation to fund anything. It just increases optionality.
Dismad, what's your view as a like ZecHub member / that receives ZCG grant funding on like the existence of the dev fund? Like, is it something that you find? Yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I publicly support the dev fund. I'm a recipient. I think it's a great model. But I'm just one person out of a large community that might not agree. And, I'm looking at you, Dozy. So, I it's not just about what I want. It's, we need to find the community consensus. And so I think, if we can get a large sample in our vote, it'll help find that. So I'm looking forward to the new votes.
Yeah, I'm really curious to know if staking will change people's mind. Like if you have more block rewards going to stakers, will less people support the dev fund, or will there be 3 allocations, meaning 1 for the dev fund, 1 for stakers, 1 for miners?
It's quite interesting. Like Josh said, there's no obligation to fund any projects. And so maybe you could set like a valid time in which funds can be put towards projects, or maybe go into the NSM or something like that. Yeah, also your question, Jason, about ZecHub, I guess it'd be a great time to mention that like we do everything we can to seek external funding, and like remaining committed to Zcash and like its mission. But we do look as in as many places as we can to find external funding.
Yeah, I mean, ZecHub's awesome. Like, they're one of the few grantees that actually try to find sustainable funding. I believe that they have multiple coins, not just Zec, in their treasury, and so that's great to see.
I did also see, I think it was a proposal, or it was an idea. It was like an article written by Pitmut about a Zcash DAO, how it could be done using like memos. Everything, all the technology exists now. Are there any thoughts on how this could be used? Yes, Paku.
Yeah, although I haven't seen that proposal, we do have a current limitation on how much you can trust a memo, given that memos are not like authenticated. You can't trust that it comes from a specific source. So like for people that not be aware, like for example, if I have an application like I don't know, I put an application that uses view keys for something like has a viewing key embedded on it, and it watches that viewing key and receives instructions from the memo. An adversary could decompile that application, extract the viewing key, derive the address, and start sending instructions to the application. So if the application can't say, oh, this memo is legit and it's telling me to, I don't know, do something, do this thing, then the application could obey an adversary to do something on its logic. So anything using memos currently today has that limitation in terms of like security and how much you can trust a memo. I just want to clarify that anything that I think that will be solved by memo bundles and extending the amount of data you can put in a memo, and that will totally unlock a lot of things for the memo field and the possible applications like this DAO thing you mentioned.
Interesting. I think I'll look for the DAO post and I'll share it in the replies. Just in the meantime, whilst I'm looking for it, was there anyone else who had ideas of where we should be looking or to give their opinions on the existing proposals? Oh, thanks. Zcash has posted it already. In which instance, I suppose thank you everyone for joining. We've had a good discussion. There's a poll coming tomorrow, Jason, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, there'll be a ZAC poll, there'll be a ZCAT poll, and then there will be a poll that goes out to coin holders.
The coin holder poll, just for folks to know, because time's running out. So in order to vote, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, or do you want to describe it so I don't get it wrong?
Yeah, so the deadline is to register your nodes or transfer your ZEC into the Orchard pool. There's this registration window, and it goes from like September 2024 to tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern time, which is like midnight UTC.
Awesome. So use your shielded ZEC. Do it now. Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you to the speakers. If you haven't already, please do take a look through the proposals and learn as much as you can.
Thank you. Thanks for putting this on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks Vito for organizing. Thanks Jason for moderating.